Hello and welcome. My name is Christina from Empowered Creator. I am a mindset and conscious manifesting teacher and coach, and this is my YouTube channel. Here I talk about all things law of assumption, mindset, conscious manifesting, the quantum universe, and a lot more. And my goal is to simplify everything without the fluff. So if you guys like this content and you would like to see more of it, I would love it if you would subscribe to this channel, comment on this video, like it, share it, and stick around. Also, if you need help with your specific situation, I offer one-on-one coaching, email coaching, small group coaching, as well as custom subliminals for whatever needs you may have. I've also recently launched a mini course about telepathically connecting with your specific person. So if you're interested in any of these services, the links are below in the description box. Click on them and they're going to take you to my website. With all that being said, let's dive into today's video. In today's video, I wanted to talk to you guys about being triggered by your specific person and how to get to the bottom of all this triggering and how to stop being triggered altogether. Because the less you are triggered by your specific person, the more of a desirable version of them you are going to see. Believe me in that. So this is what I'll be discussing in today's video. Stay tuned. So I know it's very common when we're manifesting a specific person, and especially when it's a specific person that you are in some kind of contact with, that you get triggered by things you want them to do that they don't do, or things you don't want them to do that they do, or things you want them to say that they don't say, or things you don't want them to say that they say, and so on. Of course, even if you're in no contact with your specific person right now, you might be having your own triggers having to do with being in no contact and not seeing any movement, not knowing what they're up to, not knowing if they're thinking about you, and all these things. So being triggered by a specific person, by their actions, by their words, by what they say or do or don't say or don't do, is actually very, very common, especially when you're manifesting them and you're inclined to look for movement, you're inclined to look for change in their behavior and in how they're showing up and in how they're treating you. And in cases when you don't see what you want, you might get extra triggered. Of course, the problem with getting triggered, especially if it's something that happens frequently or on a regular basis, is that it can interfere with your manifesting. Because think about it. If you're manifesting a certain version of your specific person, but then you keep noticing how they are in the 3D and how they're showing up in the 3D, and you keep getting triggered, then essentially you're telling yourself and your mind two different stories. On the one hand, you're trying to impress your mind with the story that they're like this, that they're loving, attentive, caring, very good at communication and all that kind of stuff. And then on the other hand, you also tell your mind the story that they're not any of that. And presumably, you also react emotionally to the things that you don't like, which further impresses the message in your subconscious that this is the story, this is the dominant story, this is how this person is. So how do you then overcome these triggers and stick to your desired story? As with everything manifesting, the answer is within you. The answer is in the actual trigger. And let me explain. Where your person says or does something that you don't like, or if maybe you want them to say or do something and they don't, and then you get triggered and then you react, that is the moment and that is the opportunity to go within and examine and take an honest look on why you got triggered in the first place. Is it truly what they said or didn't say, or what they did or didn't do? Or is it the story that you built around it? Because at least 9 times out of 10, if not 10 times out of 10, it has to do with the story you build around whatever fact, whatever trigger. You want to figure out what is the story you're telling yourself about whatever it is that triggered you. And you also want to figure out why that story triggered you. Let me give you an example. Let's say you texted your specific person and they took several hours to respond, or maybe they responded the next day or 2 days later. If that triggered you, you want to figure out and you want to know what story you built around that trigger. In other words, why it triggered you. Is it perhaps because you built a story that your specific person is ignoring you, rejecting you, doesn't care about you, doesn't want to be with you, doesn't want to communicate with you, doesn't care to respond to you quickly? 9 times out of 10, if not 10 times out of 10, if this neutral fact, if this event has triggered you, that is probably the story that you are telling yourself, and that is why you're feeling so triggered. If a good friend had done that instead, let's say you texted them and they didn't respond until the following day or for 2 days, would it trigger you the same way? In most cases, most likely, it wouldn't trigger you the same way. And the reason why it wouldn't trigger you if a friend did it is because you don't have that rejection story, that story of they're ignoring me, or they don't care to talk to me, or they don't care about me, about your friend, that you are actually building about your SP. So if your self-concept and your story about your SP was actually a story of security, a story of people don't ghost me, people don't ignore me, and even if he did for a day or two, it's okay. He was probably busy. Maybe he lost his phone. Maybe his phone broke. Maybe his battery had died. Maybe he was on a trip and forgot his charger. Who knows? There are so many possible explanations. Why did you immediately jump to the worst case scenario and allowed yourself to be triggered by a neutral fact? Why did this same neutral fact not bother you if a friend did it to you? That's because you feel secure in your friend's friendship and feelings towards you. That's why you don't feel like your friend doesn't care about you. And so even though the fact is the same, you actually gave it a different meaning when it came from two different people. Another example, let's say you had been planning to go on a date with your specific person. And the day of the date, they actually call you or text you and apologize, and they tell you, I'm sorry, something really urgent came up and I'm not able to make it after all. And so they cancel on you. For most people, that would be a big, big trigger. However, the way you want to approach this trigger is with an inquisitive mind and ask yourself, why did I get triggered in the first place? Was it perhaps because I built a story around them canceling on me that said that they don't care about me, they don't respect me, they don't want to spend time with me, I'm not a priority for them, etc., etc. Because if you had actually taken their word at face value and believed and went along with their explanation that something truly urgent came up for them, and they had no choice but to cancel the date, would you actually now feel triggered? Chances are, if you had given this a different meaning, if you had seen it under a different perspective and under a different perception, you wouldn't have been triggered. And so what happens when you get triggered by events like this and that is that, as I said, you're reacting emotionally, you are giving your mind and your subconscious mind the message that this is how this person is, this is the story, I'm reacting emotionally to it, so this is what is true for me. This is my assumption. This is my belief. This is my expectation of that person. And so then you start expecting the disrespectful behavior. You start expecting or fearing the unwanted or undesirable behavior. And so then that expectation becomes dominant within you and it starts getting established in your reality. And your specific person starts showing up like that more and more. In other words, they start confirming your fears, your doubts, your insecurities, and your triggers. So what you want to be doing to start breaking this cycle of being triggered by all the things that your specific person does or doesn't do in the 3D that you don't like is that you need to start examining the trigger and you need to start examining what is the story that you're telling yourself about this trigger. What is the story that you have built around this fact, whatever it is that they did or didn't do or said or didn't say, and what you make it mean for you. You want to start examining what being triggered by the story says about you, about your self-concept, about your perceptions and your expectations and your dominant story that you're holding within about your specific person. This is more of a mindset shift. This is something that is a process, usually doesn't happen overnight. It takes some inner work, it takes some introspection, but believe me, the results and the outcomes are very, very rewarding because as you start being triggered by your specific person less and less, they are going to start showing you a very, very different version. A version that is much more aligned to who you ideally want to be seeing and dealing with. So, examine your triggers, figure out the stories you're building around them, and if the stories you're building around them are not aligned with what you want to be experiencing in your 3D and what you're manifesting, you need to start changing these stories. With all that being said, I'm going to wrap up this video here. I intend that this has helped. As always, I very much appreciate you guys being on this channel, watching this content. I love making this content for you. And as always, I look forward to seeing you all at the next video. Until then, take care and bye-bye.